Hello everyone, this is Professor Troy, and this is Psychology 36, Abnormal Psychology. Today we're going to be talking about the last topic of this semester that's required, and that's substance abuse and substance-related disorders. Okay. First, I know a number of you have taken classes related to psychological disorders before or had some exposure to them in your intro classes. So I wanted to make some corrections and change some things because the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorders, gets updated fairly regularly every few years, anywhere between 5 to 10 years. And there was an update about a year and a half ago that changed the diagnosis of substance-related and addictive disorders. If you haven't seen this page before, don't worry about it. I'm going to post a link to it. It's not something that I included in the materials, but I'll post a link to it in the next announcement, so you'll see it there. This is a website that lists the updates to the different diagnostic criteria. And the major update that happened with the last DSM-5, the latest iteration of DSM, when it comes to substance-related disorders, was what we're looking at to meet criteria for substance-related disorders. They used to make a distinction between abuse and addiction. Basically, abuse was somebody who used the drug excessively and out of what's normal or beyond the normal uses of the drug. And then addiction was when you experienced what they called tolerance and withdrawal, and that meant that your body became physically dependent on this thing to survive. They've washed out that differentiation. Now it's a more comprehensive diagnosis where what they're talking about is, are you using it, how much are you using it, and is there that physical dependence on it, but they're not distinguishing the two different things between abuse and dependence. Okay, so that was one of the big things. So if you hear people say things like tolerance and withdrawal and abuse versus dependence, they're probably referring to an older iteration of the DSM, not the latest one. So now it's all under substance-related addictive disorders, and then there's mild, moderate, and severe. Mild substance-related addictive disorder, etc., moderate or severe, depending on how much it's impacting your functioning. Okay. Two other big changes for the DSM-5 version. One was that coffee used to be considered an addictive substance, and they've eliminated caffeine, or I shouldn't say coffee, they've eliminated caffeine from being able to meet criteria for diagnosis because they're not sure how withdrawals from caffeine affect your day-to-day functioning, so that doesn't exist anymore. But they have added in something new. They've added in gambling because research has indicated that people who gamble have the same sort of physiological response when they stop gambling as people do when they're using drugs or alcohol and they stop, and the same sort of behavioral interference. So taken out caffeine, added in gambling. So those are basically the sort of three big changes. Okay. All right. Again, I'll post this link so you'll have it, but you can take a look at some of the changes. This doesn't give you the diagnostic criteria. It just gives you some of the updates. Okay. Now, going through this slide deck. When we're talking about addiction, okay, this is not substance use disorder. It's talking about the physical and psychological addictive process. What we're talking about is that it's a change in your body's state. When you take in any type of drug or alcohol, and alcohol is a drug, if you take it in long enough, your body's going to start to adjust, and it's going to start to get used to having that substance in your body. And what's going to happen eventually is, as your body adjusts, you're going to need that substance to feel normal. Normally, when you take in a drug or alcohol for the first time, it changes the way you feel. You get physical reactions to it depending on what the drug does to the body. You get emotional changes, things happen. But as you use this drug more and more, what will happen is those changes that you get for the first time you used it will be less and less noticeable. And a funny thing happens after a while. Eventually what's going to start to happen is that if you don't have the drug, you're going to start to feel these unpleasant and uncomfortable feelings. And the only way to feel normal again is by having the drug, if you've used it enough. And we call this dependence, right? So your body depends on the drug to feel normal because if you've used it enough, you really can't feel normal without it and your body's adjusted. So addiction is when you've basically used the drug so much that your body now needs this drug to feel normal. You're addicted to it, and without that drug, you can't feel normal anymore. Okay? Certain drugs are more addictive than others. Crack cocaine tends to be very, very addictive, where in other drugs, I'm trying to think of an example here. Let's say something like Tylenol, which is a drug, tends to not be very addictive. Okay, there's a couple of different reasons why certain drugs are more addictive than others. And if you think back to intro to psychology and you think back to positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement and associative learning, classical conditioning, etc., this helps explain the addictive process. I don't want to go into it too much because it would just be hours and hours of explanation of behavioral psychology and physiology. But basically, there's a couple of things to think about. There's a couple of things that make drugs more addictive. Speed of absorption, meaning how fast the drug goes into your body. The faster in, the more likely you are to be addicted. So crack cocaine and regular cocaine are the same drug. It's the same active ingredient. It has the same effects on the body. The only difference is that crack is chemically altered that allows it to maintain its associative properties if it's inhaled. Okay, so if you burn or try to smoke regular cocaine, it doesn't get you high because it breaks down the active ingredient. But if you burn or inhale crack cocaine because it's been altered a little bit, it still maintains its properties where it can get you high. However, snorting a drug, which is how regular cocaine is done, takes anywhere between about 15 minutes to actually feel the effects, 15 to 20 minutes to feel the effects. Inhaling something takes a few seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. What happens is that when you inhale something, because of how quick the reaction is, how quick your body basically notices this, you associate the high with that inhaled thing much faster than you'll associate the high with the thing that might be snorted like cocaine is. So it's the same drug, but crack tends to be much, much more addictive because you inhale it, you get the high quickly. Otherwise, snorting it, if there's that delay, it takes a lot longer for your body or your brain to make that connection. So that's one reason why certain drugs tend to be more addictive. So the method of ingestion, how fast it's going to be absorbed. All right. So there's a couple of different ways to ingest the drug. Inhalation is one. If you look here, injection is another way to do it. So IV drugs, heroin tends to be IV. Sometimes meth can be IV related. There's a couple different drugs that are physically they're injected into your veins, right? Injection tends to be very, very rapid when it comes to the drug getting into your system and stimulating you. So the faster it's absorbed, the more likely you are to be addicted. Okay. Now, other ways to absorb the drug or other ways to take the drug into your body, mucosal absorption. This is snorting, typically what's done with cocaine. Sometimes people put cocaine in their eyelids. Sometimes people put it under their tongue. You can snort other things. Some people snort meth, crystal methamphetamine. And again, it takes a little bit longer for this to get in your body when you snort it than it does if you inhale it. Okay. Oral ingestion, this basically means like swallowing it, taking a pill. Any pill that you take in is ingested orally. This takes a little bit longer. This takes between 20 and 30 minutes, sometimes as much as 40, depending on a couple of different things. Alcohol also is ingested. It's swallowed. It takes a little bit longer to get into your bloodstream. So again, the longer it takes to get into your bloodstream, the more difficult it is to get addicted. Now, the second thing that contributes to how addictive a drug is how fast it leaves your body. Okay, so faster in, faster out, more likely to be addicted. So the way that it leaves your body is that your body basically breaks down the drug. Without getting into the physiology behind this, what happens is that when a drug is in your system, its useful life, it's what we call its half-life, tends to start to break down. And so half-life is how long it takes for 50% of the drug that's currently in your system to be broken down. So if a drug has a 4-hour half-life, if you take 25 milligrams of it, in 4 hours, the equivalent of 12.5 milligrams are left. In 8 hours, it's not totally gone. It goes half again. So if it's 12.5 after 4 hours, then it becomes 6.25 after 8 hours, then it becomes 3.125 after 12 hours. It keeps going kind of a half of a half of a half. The longer the half-life, the longer the drug stays in your system. The shorter the half-life, the quicker the drug leaves your system. So when we think in terms of addiction, the more addictive drug would be one that goes in faster and leaves faster. Faster in, faster out, more likely to be addicted. So let's say heroin. Let's say you inject heroin intravenously, and let's say the half-life, and I'm making this up because the heroin half-life is longer, but let's say the half-life for heroin is an hour. Okay, so you inject it, it gets into your system in about 15 to 25 seconds, and it leaves your system, the big bulk of it leaves in about an hour, 2 hours, give or take, as the half-life is breaking down. The question is going to be, is that more addictive or less addictive than, let's say, cocaine, which you snort, which can take a few minutes to get high off of, and let's say it's got a half-life of, I don't know, 5 hours. The answer is the heroin. Heroin's much more addictive. And although if you think about it logically, that might not make much sense, because you're going to think, well, of course, I'd want to use the drug that lasts longer. I'd want to use the drug that gives me a longer of a high. The flip side of that is, which drug are you going to have to use more frequently? The one that gets in faster and leaves faster, or the one that takes longer to get in and longer to leave? The one that you're using more frequently is the one that you're more likely to get addicted to. It's just the way that it is. So faster in, faster out, more likely to get addicted. Okay, and for that reason, drugs like, cigarettes, nicotine, right? That's very addictive. People smoke cigarettes, and after smoking, a couple of times, they're addicted almost immediately. Heroin, again, fast in. Depending on the type of heroin you use, it can leave fairly quickly. Fast in, fast out, more likely to be addicted. Okay, versus drugs like cocaine, which take a little longer to get in. They can last for a while, and they're less addictive than something like a heroin or nicotine, etc. Okay, so again, faster in, faster out, more likely to be addicted. Okay. Another thing that makes drugs more or less addicting is the availability of the drug. If the drug is available, then more people are likely to try it, more people are likely to get addicted. If it's not available, less people are likely to try it, less people are likely to get addicted. Right now, there is a plethora of heroin available, and that's partly the reason why there's a spike in heroin usage. It's a huge thing right now. Heroin overdose, heroin use is very, very big all over the country. But especially in New York and especially in Brooklyn, it's very available. And heroin happens to be one of those drugs that you do intravenously, fast in, fast out, more likely to be addicted, and it's very available. Okay. Now, one thing that we talk about when we talk about substance abuse is we talk about categories of drugs. Okay. And I want to explain this a little bit because it'll make things make a little bit more sense. We typically categorize drugs based on the effect that they have on the central nervous system. Things that slow down or reduce the activity of the central nervous system we call depressants or downers. Things that increase the activity of the central nervous system we call stimulants. Okay. Now, when we think of depressants or downers, that doesn't mean you become depressed. Okay, that's sort of a misnomer. It just means that it slows down the functioning. It's very common that people that use depressants experience symptoms of depression, but that's sort of ancillary. It's sort of secondary. The big thing is think about it slowing everything down. It slows down your heart rate. It slows down your breathing. It slows down your brain activity. You think slower. You move slower. Everything slows down. It doesn't mean that you're experiencing symptoms of clinical depression. It doesn't mean you're going to experience symptoms of thoughts of suicide. It doesn't mean that you're going to experience sad mood per se. It just means that it slows things down. And stimulants tend to speed things up. Okay. Now, here are some of the more common depressants. Okay, alcohol, sedative hypnotics. These are here, right? Benzos, Valium, Rohypnol, Xanax, etc. They're all listed here, so I'm not going to go through them. All right. Now, stimulants: nicotine, cocaine, amphetamines, anything that increases the speed and reactivity and the functioning of the central nervous system. Okay, speeds up your heart rate, speeds up your breathing, speeds up brain activity, etc. These are considered stimulants, right? They stimulate you. They make you active. Okay. I only have a few seconds left in this video, so I'm going to stop here. I'll make a second video just after this, and I'll kind of keep going with substance abuse. Okay. All right. To be continued.